We will be taking questions, obviously, during the session, both online and in person. We are using the Glisser app to do that. The best way to access that is via the QR code just over my left-hand shoulder. You can also access that via the URL at glsr.live/ETL21. If you are watching online, in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a little plus button. If you just click on that, and you can raise any questions as we go through. So with all of that said, I hope we're in for a really exciting and interesting session here, and I will hand over to Luke Bilton from Expo Platform. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So what I'm going to talk about today is a problem which is quite close to my heart, which is how to solve product discovery. And so from the transition from pure in-person events to virtual events, one of the big issues over the last 18 months has been about how do you actually connect buyers with suppliers, and fundamentally that's what those of us in the trade show business are here for. So why is it a problem worth solving? Well, firstly, I'll just talk to you briefly about Expo Platform. We work with some of the world's leading exhibition organisers, so we work with companies such as Informa, Clarion, Reed Exhibitions, etc. We work with them globally, and what I'm going to talk about today is product discovery and why we should even care about it. So for those in the exhibition game, it couldn't really be more important. 78% of exhibition revenue comes purely from stand sales. Now that's something which exhibition leaders talk about changing, and digital going from currently around about 5% up to 25% potentially in the next 2 to 3 years. But right now, exhibition stand sales is the massive majority of everything that happens. So being able to connect buyers and sellers is the existential problem for all of those in exhibitions. So there's a few reasons why the traditional way of serendipity and walking around a show isn't actually good enough. One of the big shifts that's happened not just over the last 18 months but over the last 5 to 10 years is that 95% of all B2B buying starts with an online search. So buyers aren't waiting for an annual show to come around before they start their journey. It starts when they need it. Now, what's been really interesting, looking at some of the stats of how consumer adoption's changed since the pandemic, is that e-commerce has accelerated by a decade in the first 3 months of the pandemic. And you can see that there have been various different studies which all point to that same stat, that there's been about a decade shift in adoption of e-commerce across the globe. And this graph here is from a really interesting McKinsey study. So what McKinsey have been doing is they've been tracking 3,500 buyers in B2B, and they were checking in with them in April last year, August, February, and onwards. And what they've been doing from that sample base, they've been seeing that buyers are becoming more and more comfortable with transacting completely online. So whereas they were face-to-face was an important part of it, actually that's become far less important, so much so that 83% of B2B buyers have become comfortable now with transacting entirely virtually. So they don't need to meet face-to-face at all. And that's a very fast shift, a very fast digital acceleration that's happened over the course of the pandemic. So that's why the existing model isn't good enough. And so something that I'm a firm believer in is that 365 marketplaces, so being able to do all of this online, is a fundamental building block of the omni-channel future of events. So if you look at the typical buyer journey, so buyers going from awareness all the way through discovery, consideration, through to actually paying and transacting, the majority of this can happen online. If you're smart as an organizer, you can have your event can be part of that journey, so they can actually meet in person and do the handshake at the physical event. But all of that buyer journey, which starts from a Google search typically, is sort of all important steps which an online marketplace can cover. Fundamentally, there's two monetization models. There's the lead generating marketplace, And this is a really close match with the exhibition model, where the supplier might pay for an annual listing, and you go all the way from awareness, that can be through content discovery, searching, filtering through companies, comparing products, matchmaking, sending out RFIs, messaging and meeting. That's your lead generating marketplace, which is very, very close to the exhibition model. And then you can go further and offer a completely transactional marketplace. Now that's much more familiar in B2C industries, where typically the transaction price is a lot lower. And that's a more sort of familiar sort of e-commerce marketplace. Generally for B2B still, we're in that sort of lead generating marketplace space, but increasingly it is going towards that transactional marketplace, dependent on the industry. So we recently did a study with machinery marketplaces and looking at agricultural machinery, materials handling, etc. And agriculture and construction, they're so far away from this transactional marketplace model, but other industries are getting there. So that being said, so I'm going to start talking about SEO, because I think SEO is, given that 95% of buyers start with a Google search, SEO couldn't be more important to this. And one of the things that really inspired me in terms of my career was when I started at Future Publishing. So Future PLC, when I joined in the early 2000s, they were a magazine empire. So we published 60 plus different magazines in the UK, all very, very niche technology titles. And you'd have like PC Format and PC Plus and What Video, What Hi-Fi. The smartest thing that Future did was, rather than letting all of these little websites and blogs carry on, is they consolidated it into one portal called techradar.com, which caused all sorts of internal politics at the time, because if you were the editor of Home Cinema Choice, you really wanted to retain Home Cinema Choice as it was. But TechRadar brought together all of those different product reviews, and what they got incredibly smart at was figuring out what I would say is still the industry-leading methodology for how to turn buyer intent from search into traffic. So I had a quick look before today, and right now TechRadar is getting 44 million monthly searches, and 87% of that is from organic search. So what we used to say was that people would go onto TechRadar with their mouse in one hand and their credit card in the other. These are generally people who are in the market looking to buy. And this is the model which I think can be directly applied by most trade show operators. The way that they do it then, it starts off for them with content. So in the case of TechRadar, they publish incredibly extensive long-form content. That may not be suitable in every single market, but the value of editorial in creating this kind of SEO impact is really worth diving into deeply and figuring it out. There are ways that you can encourage exhibitors and nurture them to contributing content in this kind of way, but there does have to be some sort of a long-form content play if you want to get serious about search. So this example here is one of many examples that they have on their site. This is around the iPhone 11, and this goes on for pages and pages and pages, all of it optimized to bring in different search results. One of the very smart things that they do is that they're able to predict what the next model is. So they've probably already written their iPhone 15 review, for example, and they follow the product life cycle. They know which releases are coming, and they'll make sure they launch their editorial early. So in this example, this is like a typical launch cycle. So this was when the iPhone 6 came out, the iPhone 6S, iPhone 7, and they'll publish these long form pieces early, update them, and keep on finding ways to drive traffic to them. So it's a really interesting case study, the way they do it. The editorial processes that Future use has actually been instrumental in ramping up their share price. Future don't talk anymore about their magazine portfolio. No, they don't even really talk about their event portfolio anymore. Fundamentally, they talk about this operation, and TechRadar was the blueprint for that. So they build up a massive funnel of organic traffic, And then the other thing that they did was that they started investing in their own e-commerce engine, which they call Hawk. And so what Hawk is, it's a way of pulling in various different affiliate links from different resellers, different stores to send people across to. That may not be suitable for B2B markets, but there are other ways to do that, to connect buyers and sellers. But it's really thinking about those two things. What's the funnel of organic traffic? And once you've got that on the site, what's the best way to monetize that? And often that will be going direct, finding ways to go directly to the seller, which is where the marketplace model comes into play. So very, very interesting. If anyone wants more information about this, actually, just you can get in touch with me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk more about this. So for most organizers then, it's about how do we transition from an event model to a 365 marketplace model, which runs alongside in parallel to the event. It's the fundamental building block of this omni-channel experience where people can search for products and then they can meet the people in the flesh at the show. It's something that we're very focused on at Expo Platform. What I've put on screen here is a couple of examples of this. On the left is a marketplace we launched recently with Comexposium for wine. And this is we've just launched it and we're just building it. There's lots and lots of different custom filters, way that you can search and filter, compare wine. And on the right here is something that we're launching with IBC at the moment, which is for all of their technology vendors. But just to give you an idea, that is typically some of the components which would go into a 365 marketplace. Being good at SEO underpins all of this. You can't have this gated. It doesn't make any sense at all if you're looking to get buyers with intent. So one of the questions which is important for anyone to answer when it comes to marketplace is how do you solve that chicken and egg problem? Marketplaces are typically a two-sided ecosystem. You need to have both buyers and sellers in order for it to work. If you have one and not the other, you don't have a marketplace, not one that provides anyone with any value. So something I've been looking at is if you really take a look at all of the successful marketplaces which are out there, you'll find that over 90% of them have all done the same thing, and that's starting with the supply side. When Uber go into a new city, the first thing that they will do, they'll spend a couple of months in San Francisco or wherever they're going into next, and they will make sure that they've got all of the taxis who are there and they've got the supply base. And it's exactly the same for exhibition organizers. And that's actually one of the competitive advantages that exhibition organizers have over a new marketplace startup, is that typically you own the relationship with your supply base. So you've already got that, which is great. What you need to do is to find ways to get that supply base into your 365 platform and encourage and find ways to get your exhibitors to actually populate it and make it valuable. But having a relationship with your supply side is absolutely the first point. Then the next challenge is how do you work with your suppliers to make sure you've got comprehensive listings? And this is traditionally something that exhibition organisers have failed at, because usually we're so concerned on the next event in the show cycle, trying to quickly, in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, get your exhibitors to update their profile. They don't really bother, they don't see the value in it, and then you're on to the next problem. So it's a much more of a long-term play. How do you work with and nurture your exhibitors to engage with this platform? So it's really all about a focus on supply management. Existing relationships with your suppliers is your competitive advantage. So how do you make that work for you? Well, one of the first things is making it easy for them. So a supplier dashboard, such as the one on the screen, makes it easy for them to publish products and also to get leads. This is something which we provide at Expo Platform, is a long list of any interactions that buyers have had with an exhibitor, so they get real-time value, real-time leads. If you're able to offer your supplier a transparent way to see all the leads they're getting, they're much more likely to see a reason to log in and go onto your platform. So that's got to be the starting point, an easy-to-use supplier management dashboard for everyone. Then there's a lot that you can do around customer success, creating onboarding assets like how-to guides, videos, PDFs. Some people, there's a mixture of automation and having customer success agents to support suppliers. Some of the people we work with are looking at different third-party verification and data sources. If you work in spaces like pharma or healthcare, for example, it's probably quite important to have third-party verification, proof that you've got the right kind of FDA and other types of ISOs and accreditation involved in that. It does vary from marketplace to marketplace, and this is where it gets quite interesting, is that the way that buyers shop from one industry to the other does vary. So having that flexibility to create different custom fields, to be able to tailor a marketplace for an industry is really important. So sometimes bringing in third-party verification and data sources is valuable. Reviews and testimonials are another thing which can add real value to a marketplace. The only thing is that can be quite hard to police. And usually you might not, well, it depends how you want to play it, but usually your exhibitors probably don't want there to be negative reviews on their profiles. So reviews and testimonials is something to think about if that is your model. This is an example from Expo Platform. We bring together any online interactions that a buyer might have, so any profile views, content views, product favorites, all of those different interaction points, as well as physical scans at a stand as well. So one dashboard which starts to bring together that sort of omni-channel experience for your suppliers. Another important part of this, and it's the way that Amazon operates a successful marketplace. In fact, it's the way that any high-value tech startup would work, is offering what we call person-to-object AI recommendations, AI matchmaking. It's the way that Spotify turns a library of 50 million songs into a tailored, personalized playlist just for you. It's the way that Netflix does it. And it's the way that platforms like ours do it as well. So what we would do is we would track all of the different interactions that a user has across our platform, the content they've been looking at, the people, the products, and then giving them tailored recommendations based on that. So this isn't just person-to-person matchmaking. Person-to-object matchmaking means that you can also see product recommendations, exhibitors who you might want to meet, content that's a good fit for you. We've just, and we're about to publish an ebook on this, our data blueprint ebook, and we ran a survey recently, and we saw that one of the most important things that the event organisers think that they can deliver with data right now is personalisation. So being able to do this personalisation layer, have a personalised online experience, personalised event agendas, is the best way of turning a massive trade show into something that's very, very laser focused and personalised to what you want as a buyer. So AI recommendations has to underpin any modern marketplace product. And then, so at this point, I'm assuming you've got a well-managed supplier base, you've got AI recommendations built on that. The final piece of the puzzle to put on top of that is the ability, in B2B certainly, to be able to provide RFP, so request for proposal, and tenders. So this is a really effective way to generate leads at scale. If you've got buyers on your platform, make it as easy for them as possible. So your buyers don't have to search through various different filters and click around the site to try to understand what they want. Having an RFP process, such as the one on screen, is a really good way for someone to go on and say, I'm looking to procure this particular type of product, this particular type of category, and then let the platform do the rest. So the platform can then pull out, well, here are the 10 exhibitors who meet your brief, and then can send out the RFP request to all of those people. So as an organizer who gets feedback from your exhibitors saying they don't have enough leads, this type of RFP and tender process is something which is often missed, but is a really effective way for your exhibitors to get value from, whether it's online or at the show itself. As mentioned, we are about to publish our new ebook, which is all about data and some of the findings from that. But we've got a whole bunch of other ebooks which are currently online as well. The one most relevant to this session is the Marketplace ebook. That's about 50 pages of advice, best practice on how to set up a marketplace, the kind of things that you need to do. If you go to expoplatform.com/ebooks, you can see the Marketplace ebook, the hybrid blueprint, the monetization blueprint, and the data blueprint, which will be coming soon. I've kind of rattled through all that quite quickly, so we've got a few minutes. If there's any questions at all, now's the time. Heather.
Perfect. I'll bring the microphone for the first one.
Okay. So from a monetization standpoint,
Yep.
what do you see your customers doing in terms of programs they're selling?
Sure. So there's a very pronounced. So the way I'd approach it is there's a very pronounced sort of, when you look at any trade show, a real like decay curve of the amount of dollars which are being spent at any show. So you've got up top, you've got your sort of your bellwether sponsors who are going to spend larger amounts. You've got your like mid-tier, and then you've got a huge long tail of your smaller exhibitors. And that when you look at any trade show, they all follow that similar long tail graph. And what's interesting is when you really see where you get the most bang for your buck, it tends to come from monetizing that long tail. So in some of the work I've done on various different brands, tend to see that around 70 to 80% of your digital revenue actually comes from monetizing the long tail. So a lot of time people like chase those bigger names and bigger sponsors and try and sell like, fully integrated like high value packages, which is great and you should. But so much of the impact comes from monetizing the long tail. So that's where I'd always start. And that can be done at Rebook. And so even if you just add on $1,000, even 500, it depends which market you're in and what the price elasticity is. But I think that for me is always the starting point. If you add in that sort of like, $1,000 to every single exhibition contract, that's going to get you 70 to 80% of the way there, which is why, going back to marketplaces, it's why marketplaces are such a great model for exhibitions. You don't have, there's no limits on inventory. You don't have 12 webinar slots to do in a year, or 50 content slots or whatever. So the marketplace model is as scalable as an exhibition is.
Thank you very much for the question.
Does that answer? Okay.
Question answered. As I mentioned at the start, we have been taking some questions during the session using Glisser. If anyone in the room or watching online has any further questions, please feel free to submit those questions whilst we're dealing with the first one. That's at glsr.live/ETL21. We'll start with the first question, which is a logical place to start, I think. So on a practical level, you talked a lot about SEO. What tips should event organisers be thinking about when they're kind of approaching that for the first time?
Sure. So there's the technical side, and then there's how you actually use it yourself as your team. So if we start on the technical side, the first thing is making sure that the platform that you're using is well optimized. So if you don't have a platform which is optimized, can surface all of your metadata, and is well built for that, then it's not going to work at all. So that's the absolute, ground zero is making sure you've got the right platform. Then, in terms of strategy, it's about consolidating. Going back to that Tech Radar example, consolidating all your resources around one strong domain, one URL. It's quite typical for event organizers to run, one portfolio might have 10, 15, 20 different event websites, and that's not going to help you at all. So in that situation, you end up just competing with yourself for SEO. So one central, well-optimized hub is the starting point. And then you get to what you do as an organizer, how you actually make it work for yourself. And so to do that, I guess the main three levers are content. So that's like making sure you know what the keywords are that you're looking to rank for, and you have an editorial team, ideally, who's producing long-term content around those editorial pillars. When it comes to suppliers, making sure that you are doing all of those supplier management things, encouraging them to update their profile, list all of their products. Some of the marketplaces I was running at Informa, 80% of our traffic from SEO was going direct to exhibitor and to exhibitors' product pages. So that can be a huge part of it. And there was a third point I was going to make, but it slipped my mind.
Always the way. No, really valuable advice, I think. I've got a bit of a question based on some of the content we had yesterday and how that kind of marries up with what you're saying. And there's a couple of companies here who've kind of stapled themselves to the fact that they want the customer to be put first in kind of the like event creation, experience creation, and making sure that when the customer, so I guess the buyer or something in a marketplace arrives somewhere, their experience is kind of put first and considered in the delivery. And whilst you were talking, you talked about making sure you have the suppliers in place. And I think probably the truth is a balance. How do you balance that, and what do you think is the right approach in that?
Sure. Well, it's got to work for both. The thing I find most interesting about working media and events is that every single industry has its own jargon, its own terminology to get under the skin of. That to me is like the endlessly fascinating bit about all of this. You can get that from keyword research, you can get that from conversations and surveys and really like understanding what a buyer-seller journey looks like in your particular industry. Every industry is different. So a good example of that is you can actually send out surveys, essentially the same kind of survey to buyers and sellers to find out and ask both sides to rank what they think is most important. And so you end up with some interesting results for that. So when I've done that in the pharma space, absolute number one thing is regulation, making sure it's got the right accreditation. So any marketplace you do in the pharmaceutical industry, that has to be the first thing that your buyers are going to want to look for and search for, doing that. When I've done the same thing in the maritime shipping industry, the number one thing that comes up there is availability. When I park my ship in a port, do they actually have the turbine or the engine that I'm looking for? That becomes the most important thing. So every industry has its own dynamics, which you need to understand. And what's also interesting, by doing that exercise, actually, if you ask both sides to rank what's important, you can see there are differences between buyers and sellers. So I often find that suppliers think that branding, like their brand, is one of the most important things. When you ask buyers the same question, they'll often say they don't care at all about the branding, they just care about price. So it can be quite interesting just seeing what the perception is within the market itself as to what the dynamic is.
Really interesting. And the last question is one we've been asking everyone on this stage in the last day or so. The future events, and I think a lot of people will agree the pandemic has shifted things forwards at quite some pace, certainly digitally. What do you see kind of being the main developments in your space over the next 3 to 5 years as we kind of push forward?
Honestly, it's hard to predict further than 6 months ahead. So omnichannel, the move to always-on events. Well, an always-on event is a bit of an oxymoron in itself, but always-on engagement with the community has to form a part of it. And something that I think that there's a really interesting journey in terms of like data literacy, which the industry is on at the moment, and I think getting much better around data science, being able to give your organisers a real-time dashboard of this is how your industry is moving, the trends, the micro trends which are going on. That's the exciting bit.
Amazing, thank you so much. Right, we've pretty much reached the end of this session here on the Orange stage at ETL 21. As I mentioned at the start, if I can just ask if you have worn headsets when you leave, if you leave them on the seat of the chair so that they can be cleaned and reused ahead of the next session. But I hope you all have an amazing day and rest of the day at ETL, and thank you very much to Luke Bilton from Expo Platform for that session. Thank you.
All right, thank you.